recently I posted a video. Crazy, I know. More specifically, this video. You can hear what I can hear, and it's just lots of mid-range, and not even good mid-range, and then just nothing else. Let's try the classic intro music. We all know what this sounds like. It's turned itself off again. I want to say thank you. The point of the video wasn't to exude the virtues of these speakers. It turned into quite the opposite. The fact that they weren't even 2.1 and weren't even stereo, because bizarrely both satellite speakers were wired together with just one IC driving them through one channel. So yeah, wasn't really a ringing endorsement. However, I still had people saying things like, do you have an affiliate link where I can buy them because they sound quite good, and how bad can they be? And they really don't sound too bad. Trust me, they're terrible. If you want to get some mediocre to good audio, you can do that for not much more than £7, and believe me, there's a world out there of stuff that's just better. There's no other word for it. Case in point, this huge 4 kilo slab of Japanese engineering is a Panasonic SC-ALL9. While from a good few years ago, I picked it up for the princely sum of just £15 at something that us British call a car boot sale. To get an idea of what a car boot sale is like if you're not from the UK, or you've never experienced such a magical thing, it's a field full of people stood around trestle tables of their own stuff, most of which they've probably picked up at car boot sales themselves over the years, and thus the cycle continues. Think of a garage sale, or garage sale as we call it here, but without the comfort, warmth and, shelter of a garage. Instead, you get to walk around a muddy field in the usual British drizzle, looking at things that other people no longer want, usually for very good reason. And on one of these tables, I found this beauty. It's worthy of note that in the UK, our electricity is extra spicy compared to those of you who use 110 or 120 volts. We use a whopping 230 here, so the fact that this thing was sat in drizzle isn't great, as it's directly mains powered, unlike the USB speakers I tested previously. Nevertheless, being a lover of old audio kit, I decided to have a word with the stall holder, and before I knew it, I was cradling this thing under my arms and heading back to my car, £15 lighter, wondering just why I'd done it. But it turns out I was in for a bit of a surprise. Let's go into a bit more depth. For what is a single unit with no external satellite speakers or subwoofer, on paper the specs are a little bit wild. For example, it contains 5 speakers. Yeah, 5. A subwoofer, although in a unit that small, can you really call it a subwoofer? 2 bass drivers, and 2 tweeters. All contained within this one enclosure. Now it is only marketed as 2.1, which is fair enough, but apparently you compare 2 of these together to run as separate stereo speakers, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, the previous owner never got to try this, because he never got to listen to the speaker at all. He told me a relative had bought it for him, he'd tried to set it up, and just couldn't get it to talk to his router. He confessed he was a complete technophobe, and the use of an app to control it and internet streaming services just weren't his bag. I've got an SC-ALL9 that I use in my kitchen, and while a great bit of kit, it does rely entirely on a quite outdated Panasonic app. Here it is. Look at that. This is 2026, and that's the kind of interface we're stuck using to get this speaker up and running. However, when I bought the SC-ALL9, which I picked up for an equally low price a few years ago, I did note that the SC-ALL9 was slightly different. According to the documentation I'd seen, it has Bluetooth built in. And of course, with Bluetooth, you don't need any kind of streaming services, you just connect your phone up to the speaker, and away you go. I've got to be honest, looking at the state of the app and how clunky things like Spotify integration are, I'm left wondering just how long my SC-ALL9 is going to work for. The owners of some smart speakers will be very quick to tell you that sometimes support is just dropped entirely, leaving you with a device you just can't use, which would be a shame, because the SC-ALL9 is, for all intents and purposes, fantastic. It has a relatively mediocre on paper 20 watt power output, but while I'm cooking away, it can really punch above its weight, even in my relatively large kitchen. I'll be honest, I bought this a few months ago when I was first starting to record videos, and I've done nothing with it. Before we try and power it up and see if it works, we're going to take it apart and see what's inside. Okay, so this is the front of the unit with the 5 speakers, and the back, with a rather meaty base port, a 3.5mm auxiliary in jack and an Ethernet connector. Along the top are touch buttons for the inputs and also internet radio station presets labelled 1 to 6. First challenge, trying to find a way into the thing. There were no screw holes evident, so I figured the front cover must come off somehow maybe? Yes, there we go. It's on a series of rubber bungs, so a quick tug and it's soon clear. There's the 5 speakers. You can see a little tear in the subwoofer's rubber surround at around the 11 o'clock position. As we'll find out later, it doesn't appear to impact audio, and I've used this speaker a fair bit since. It seems to be absolutely fine. You can now see the screw holes dotted around the front of the unit. Thankfully, they're just standard crosshead screws, which came out with little to no bother. They were impressively tight though. I'll have to remember that when putting them back together, to avoid the whole thing shaking itself to bits. Trying to separate the front from the rear of the unit proved to be interesting. It felt like it was almost glued together. I tried to use this tool from a mobile phone repair kit, which did absolutely nothing. And then had to get a little bit more forceful. In the end, it turns out there's a sort of foam seal between the two halves. And this really did provide some resistance when trying to pry the front from the back. I just had to keep slowly chipping away until eventually... There we go. Not gonna lie, I am massively impressed by the size of the magnets on the speakers, especially the mid-bass units. They're also in their own little enclosures sealed to the back of the unit to provide some kind of acoustic isolation. The front panel weighs more than half of the weight of the complete speaker. Next, we'll remove the bass trumpet. I really like how everything so far seems to be modular. Just unscrew, and away it goes. You can see there's several modules in here. We have a manufacturing date of March 2016. It's actually a bit newer than I thought it was. We'll unplug everything from the main board. These are Bluetooth, Wi-Fi antennas, and also a variety of ribbon cables to other daughter boards dotted around the unit. Finally, we'll unplug these beefy connectors to the power supply, 3.5mm input socket, and Ethernet connection. The screws holding the front panel on are all the same length, but the screws holding the circuit boards in place are different, so I'm going to keep those separate. A little tactical wiggle, and she's away. There's less on the circuit board than I imagined, and what struck me most of all was the lack of heat sinking. Sure, it's got that one panel on the back, but I thought there'd be, well, just more. Then I remembered something pretty crucial. This item uses Class D amplifiers, or digital amplifiers, which are up to 90% efficient. So if your amplifier has a theoretical output of 80 watts, you've only got 8 watts of heat to dissipate. That'll be why there's not much in the way of aluminium finned goodness within this speaker. Talking of Class D amplifiers, here's the first one I found. This is a Texas Instrument chip, a TAS5727. And here's a little bit more information about it. You might want to pause so you can read that. It's a chip that includes the amplifier and also an equaliser. And from a bit of PCB tracing, I worked out that this amplifier drives the stereo channels, i.e. the 2 mid-bass drivers and the 2 tweeters. This chip was a little bit more interesting. It's the only other one with a heatsink attached, so from this I deduced that it's the other amplifier, but it's a chip unique to Panasonic applications and I couldn't really find much out about it online. But following the tracks led straight to the pins on the connector that drive the subwoofer. Interesting. Here are the 2 chips, labelled 1 and 2. 1 is the Texas Instrument chip, and 2 is the mystical Panasonic silicon lump of mystery. Next I thought we'll have a quick look at the power supply. The usual caveats apply here. Power supplies, especially switch mode items like this one, can retain charge long after they're unplugged. Any decent power supply by a respectable manufacturer will have discharge resistors, so I assume that's the case here. But don't rely on someone else's 10-year-old design to save you from being electrocuted. I've had a belt from a capacitor in a power supply before, and it wasn't fun. The world sort of went black for 2 or 3 seconds, and I had a lovely burn mark on my finger for 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was, afterwards. You don't want that. It's held in place by a couple of screws, some of which were cleverly hidden, and eventually I'm able to wiggle it free. You can see the Ethernet port, AC input socket, and on the left we've got the 3.5mm auxiliary input too. It still baffles me why the previous owner didn't use this to connect something to the speaker, but I guess we'll never know. Or it might just not work. I think we've done enough digging, so let's start putting it back together. Being a unit that makes what I assume to be quite a lot of bass, we're going to make sure all the screws are nice and tight, but without stripping the threads. I took a mental note of how tight they all were as I was undoing them, but of course this isn't particularly scientific. Let's re-secure the main PCB and start connecting everything back up. As always with fiddly ribbon connectors, take care because they're annoyingly easy to damage. And there's the trumpet. We'll pop that back in place, making sure it's securely fastened. Don't really want that rattling loose during use. And finally, the speakers are plugged back in, and that front cover is lowered gently back into place. Again, we're back to that guessing game of how tight should we do the screws. I guess I'll find out if they're tight enough when the speaker either stays in one piece or rattles itself to bits in the near future. Right, time for a power on. There were some lights which illuminated, a good start, but putting the thing in pairing mode turned out to be a bit of a pain in the backside. Being a man, I of course didn't read the instructions, I just aimlessly mashed the buttons until something happened.
I think I've just tried to connect my laptop to someone's telly. Oh no, don't connect to that. No. It says it's connected to something. Oh. Hey! That sounds very good. Well, more importantly, it works, which is a nice surprise. Not very loud. So is that maximum, or can I get more from this? Oh, Jesus Christ! Whoa! It's got a fair bit of oomph to it, hasn't it? I measured the sound output of the Temu speakers with a decibel meter on my phone. I'm going to have to do the same again, so let's switch to the second camera. Measured 1 meter away, the Temu speakers achieved 87 decibels.
The Panasonic peaked at 99. Bear in mind that an increase of 3 decibels represents a doubling of the sound pressure. Impressive. I think I'll pop this in the garage, so next time one of the cars spits its dummy out, which will probably be in about a week, I can make the experience a little bit more bearable. That's about it for this one. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and hopefully I'll see you next time. In the meantime, take care. Cheers.